Hi, this is Lee. Today I'm doing a video for Kenya. Kenya wants to know, and this is sort of like an extension of the last video I did with the trick in the Cricut to cut bigger than Design Space wants you to do. So in that one I did the frog, if you remember, and I put a white offset around it. So Kenya wants to know how to do a bleed around the outside of an image so that when you cut, you don't have any white spaces, and that's what I'm going to show you how to do today. So first of all, let me say where I got this image from. I365 Art Digital Designs. They're super cute. She's got a lot of super cute stuff on here, and the one that Kenya wanted to do was this one, Pajama Girls Clip Art. And so I just purchased that file, and if you want to practice with the same image that I'm using, then you can just go to this Etsy store and download, purchase and download that file. Okay, so back to Photoshop, and this is our final version. This is what we're aiming for. We're going to try to get the Cricut to cut out this girl, and we actually want the Cricut to cut this right here. We don't want the Cricut to cut this big huge background, but that's just the bleed, so that if Cricut is off a little bit, it doesn't leave a white space around in her outline. Okay, so we're going to end up with a couple of different layers. The original layer, and then we're going to add a layer mask, and I'll show you how to do that. And then we're going to have the registration marks that are going to tell us where to place it on the Cricut mat. This is going to be the shadow layer, okay? And then finally we are going to have a cut layer, all right? And that will be included with the registration marks. This is the image that we'll upload to Design Space. And then this is the image we will print, all right? So I am going to revert back to the original and then go through how to do this. This one has a couple of little extra steps because of the when the background was erased, it's a little bit jagged, so I'm going to explain to you how to get a nice clean cut just using Photoshop. Okay, so I'm just going to revert back to the original here by going to File, Revert. That gets rid of everything I've done before. Alright, so the first thing is, let's assume that you're practicing this with letter size paper. Now with this method, you can go up to 11.5 by 23.5, but let's just say you're going to practice with 11 by 8.5 by 11. So we need to check the size of this. We want the whole thing printed, including the registration marks, to be less than 8.5 by 11, because we want the entire registration marks to be printed on the page. If you have the registration marks all the way at the edges of 8.5 by 11, they're going to get cut off, and your cuts will be off when you put it on the Cricut. So you want to make sure the entire registration mark is on the printed page. So we're going to have to resize her a little. If I go to Control-Alt-I opens up image size, you can see that she's 4.3 by 11.6. I'm going to make the height of this, I'm going to make it 10. Okay, and then I'm going to change the canvas size. I need to give some room to myself to add a shadow layer and some registration marks. So I'm going to go to Image, Canvas Size, and with the relative box checked, if without that checked, it just gives me the right size, and I could add an inch on each side, or I can click Relative and just type in 1 for each of those, and it's going to add an inch on each side. Okay? So there is that. Now if I do Control-Alt-I, she is 4.5 by 11. I'm going to actually take, let's see, I'm going to change the canvas size, image, canvas size. I'm going to change the height to 10.5. It says it will clip some off, but it's not enough to worry about. She's still all on there, and I have room for my registration marks at the top and bottom. Okay, so normally what I would do for this, since she's got a nice dark outline, normally I would just put a shadow layer underneath, but because the file has some, it's a little bit, you can see that there are bits around the edge that are transparent, and Photoshop doesn't really know how to select those. I'll show you what I would normally do to make a shadow layer, and I'll show you why it doesn't work with her. So normally what I would do is I would hold down Control and click on the picture of her over in the layers. If your layers panel isn't open, go to Window, Layers, and open it. So then on the image of her, I hold down Control and click, and that will select everything that's on that layer. If I zoom in, you can see the little call them marching ants, the selection tool around that. Double click on the hand to resize that. So normally what I would do is I would go to Select, Modify. I'm going to modify my selection, and I'm going to expand it. I'm going to make that selection bigger. Photoshop wants to know how much bigger do I want to make it. I'm going to make it 20 pixels bigger. You can experiment with this and see what works for you. You could do 10, 30, whatever. It depends on the size of your image also. So now you can see that I have expanded that, and it's given me a border around her. So what I would normally do is make a new layer, Control-Shift-N, and I would call this the bleed layer or the shadow layer. And then over here I would pick something close to her outline as the color. I'm going to the color picker, I click on that, and then click on the image with the little dropper tool to get something close to her outline color. And then making sure that my new layer is selected, not that one, but the new layer. I just use the paint bucket to fill that selection, and I will move that down to the bottom. But if I zoom in, you can see the problem using this simple method. It works for things that have a nice clean background taken out of them, but if there's any sort of transparent pixels, Photoshop doesn't know whether to select them or not select them. Are they part of what we want to do, or are they not? It doesn't work, because if you were to try to cut this on the Cricut, and I did try this first, it gets a really jaggedy outline because you can't see it here, but there's other pixels that it is selected up in here, and it's just really if I was to try to fill this with let me make a new layer and show you. If I just try to fill this, which is what you would cut, you can see that I'm filling it with pink. You can see that there's all these little pink things, and the Cricut's going to want to try to cut every single one of these, and it's just jagged and it takes a long time. So I'll show you a way to smooth that out a little. I'm just going to select that layer and delete it. Yes, and I'll select this layer. I'm clicking on the trash can down here to delete those. And then I'll double click on the hand to get her back to normal size. Okay, so I'm going to start off the same way. I'm going to hold down Control and click on her picture to get a selection. And now I'm going to make a new layer mask. I'm going to go to Layer, Layer Mask, Reveal Selection. That adds a layer mask to this layer, and it colors everything we don't want black, and everything we do want, our selection, is white. I can look at this layer mask by holding down the Alt key and clicking on that. And I've done this before by accident. I'm like, oh no, what happened to my picture? It's still there. All you got to do is click on her and she comes back. But to deal with this layer mask, hold down Alt and click, and now you can edit this mask. If I zoom in, you can see again the problem that Photoshop has with this, trying to figure out what to select and what not to select. There are some pixels here. It looks like whoever erased the background probably used a brush that had a fuzzy edge, and you know, it looks fine if you were just going to print that out, that's fine, but for adding a border to it, we really want a nice, clean, defined edge to it. So what we're going to do is we're just going to adjust this layer. So to do that, we're going to go to Image, Adjust, Threshold. All right, and this is kind of like in Inkscape when you do a bitmap trace. We are telling Photoshop to choose to decide, is a pixel black or is it white? We're only giving it two choices. We're not giving it any transparency. It can't be just like 50% on or 50% off. It's either on or it's off. And so we can adjust the threshold of the pixels that we want it to include. If I go all the way up to 255, you can see that its threshold becomes tighter, and there's some black spots in here that we want to include, but Photoshop thinks they're not part of the selection. And if I go all the way down to the other end, you can see there's some stuff out here that didn't get erased. There are probably some very transparent pixels that just did not get completely erased, and then we got a jagged outline around her down here in her legs. So we want to pick something sort of in the middle. We want it to be maybe about 100, okay? And then we'll say okay. Now if you zoom in, you can see that it did a pretty good job, and depending on how much time you want to spend, you can edit this layer. So I can turn the paintbrush on, and I can switch back here, make white my paint color. If I right click while I've got the paintbrush tool selected, I can select the size and the hardness of the brush shape. I want it to be a little bigger than that, maybe about like this. And you definitely want it to be at 100% hardness. You want a nice hard edge on this because we don't want any half selected pixels. And then you can go in and you can edit, you know, anything that doesn't look right. And like I said, you can spend as much time on this as you want, and I'm not going to spend a ton of time since I'm just doing a tutorial. You can also change your paintbrush color to black and change the size and subtract things out of the selection. So anything that you paint black is going to be not part of the selection. Anything you paint white will be part of the selection. All right, so now what I want to do, while I'm still on this layer, I'm going to click on the magic wand tool, and I'm going to click on the white part to select her, to select the white outline. And then I'm going to go back to the original image, and I'm going to invert this selection to select everything that's not her. And I'm going to do, let's see, select, modify, no, select, inverse. And I'm just going to press delete on the keyboard to get rid of anything that was in the background there. All right, I'm going to invert it again, select, inverse. And now I'm going to make a new layer, Control-Shift-N, and I'm going to call this cut image. All right, and I'm going to fill this with, it doesn't really matter what color. So on the new layer, cut image, I'm going to fill with pink. Then I'm going to zoom in, and you can see that even though we did go through that cleanup, there's still some pixels that fall outside that selection. I will just inverse my selection again, select, inverse, and say delete. Okay, then you can see, let me undo it and show you. See these little pixels? And I press delete, and now they're gone. So that gives us a nice clean outline for cutting. All right, so that is going to be our cut image. And for that, we're just going to select this. Now we're going to make the border. I'm going to send that to the back by dragging it down underneath the other one. But with that still selected, I'm going to use the magic wand tool and click on it to select just the pink, whatever's painted pink. And now I'm going to outset my my selection. Select, modify, expand. And now I'll expand it by 20 pixels. Make a new layer, Control-Shift-N. This is going to be the bleed layer. Okay. With that new layer selected, I'm going to switch my color, active color, to black. I'm going to click on the black, and I'm just going to pick something that's close to her. I think I already did this, but just to show you again. And then I'll just use the paint bucket to fill that layer. All right, it's behind her. You can see if I move it to the top, but I want it behind. All right, now all I have to do is add registration marks and then save two different PNG images, and I'll show you how to do that. So let's add the registration marks. I'm going to put this at a fixed size, the rectangle marquee tool of 0.4 inches. Click here, and I will use the paint bucket to fill that with pink. It doesn't matter what color your registration marks are. All right, deselect, and now I'll move to the move tool. Oops, I got to go back. I forgot to make a new layer. Control-Shift-N to make a new layer. And that's going to be registration marks. All right, now I can fill this with pink. Deselect it. Move tool. And now I can use these tools up here at the top. If I click on the three dots here, I want to use the alignment tools. I want it to align to the canvas, not the selection. So canvas. Now I'm going to click on this. I'm going to align it to the left and the top. I'm going to hold down Shift and Alt. No, which is it? I have to remember which ones it is. Control and Alt to make a copy. Click and drag. Now I can take that one and move it to the top and the right. Okay. Now you can see whenever you do this Control Alt thing and click and drag, it makes a new layer. Let's just select that layer, hold down Shift and select that layer, and then we're going to join those together. We're going to merge them. So you'd be like layer, merge. I'm just going to use a keyboard shortcut. It's Control E. Those are both on the same layer now. Now I do Control Alt again and pull down, and I can align those to the left and the bottom. So you can see they're aligned down there now. Now I can select both of those and do Control E, and those are all on the same layer now. All right. Okay, so now this should be ready to go, and all we have left to do is save two different PNG files, one for printing and one for cutting. First, I would go ahead and save it as it is as a PSD file. So Control-Shift-F for save as. Natural hair pajama girl. I'll save it in this for print and natural hair pajama girl. Print and cut. Save it as a PSD so it saves all of the different layers. Okay. And now we're going to save two different PNG files. Now a PNG file is flat but can have a transparent background. So the first one we want to save is the print file. And for that we're just going to turn off this pink right here. We still want the registration marks to show because that shows us how we're going to trim our paper. And the rest of us we'll just leave and we'll say Control-Shift-S for save as, and we'll change the name of it here. Natural hair pajama girl print. I do it in capital letters so I can see, sticks out to me that it's the one I've been working on. And then we're going to change it from a Photoshop file to a PNG file. Save. Okay. What we want to do is turn off the print, turn the bleed layer, and turn on the cut image. Okay, then we'll save this as a PNG file also. This we will rename to Natural Hair Pajama Girl Cut, and then change it to a PNG. Save. Okay. And we can open those and look at the difference. Open. These two, right? No, not that one. This one and this one. Open. So here is our cut file. We're going to upload this to Design Space. Here is our print file. You'll print this directly from Photoshop. Let's check the sizes of these. Control-Alt-I. 4.7 by 10.5, 300 pixels per inch. Okay. Natural hair pajama girl cut. Control-Alt-I. And that is also 4.7 by 10.5. Now I'll show you something. You can either resize this image here in Photoshop, or you can resize it in Design Space. Design Space won't read at 300 pixels per inch. It will read at 72. So if you import it at this size, it's going to come in huge, and then you just resize it in Design Space. Or you can go ahead and resize this to 72 and say OK and save. Control S to save. And now it should be at 72 pixels per inch, which should come into Design Space the right size. So let's go to Design Space and upload that. There she is. Open. We just want to upload that as a simple image. Continue. And you can see you don't have to erase anything here because it's got a transparent background already. And then we just want to save that as a cut image and upload it to our page. Okay, it didn't come in at quite exactly the right size. We can just change that to 4. What was it, 4.7? Hold on, I gotta look again. No, 4.694. Okay. Should be exactly the same. Oh, because I changed the resolution of it. Okay. Alright, that's really close. It'll be fine. I'm going to change the color of it to purple so we can see it. Alright, so this is what you're going to send to your mat. Alright, so I click on Make It. And you can see that your registration marks is what you're going to trim your print down to. You'll trim it across the top and down the left side, and then you'll align that exactly with your cardstock border that you have should have already cut from the other video. And then you should be able to cut out your girl, and there'll be a little bit of a bleed, so if the cricut's a little bit off, it won't leave a white sliver next to her. And that should be it. It's a little bit longer because we had to clean up the edges, but you'd basically do the same thing with any image. Whether you have to clean up the images and do that layer mask will be variable, but it's a good tool to have in your Photoshop toolbox. Okay, so let me know if you have any questions.